If I ask you right now, off the top of your head, to name the biggest game companies in the world, what would you say? Probably Microsoft, Sony, Nintendo, maybe EA, Activision Blizzard, right? Throw in a couple of other big names for good measure. But not many people are going to say Tencent. Why? Because typically, we're not playing their games, are we? At no point do you open a video game and see the word Tencent on your screen. But Tencent is the world's largest video game vendor. Chances are, if you are a frequent gamer, you've opened a game that they own either fully or partially in the last month. You probably just didn't know about it. While companies like Microsoft and Sony create their own products, publish some others, and always slap their name on almost everything they do, Tencent has been silently acquiring everything they can in the games industry. And not just the games industry. The scariest part of all this, well, 10 years ago, they owned almost nothing that you touched in the West. 5 years ago, they owned some of the largest Western gaming companies, and now they own a massive chunk of the Western games industry, and that grows year on year by tens of billions of dollars. So where does it end? And is the fact that Tencent operates as an extension of the Chinese Communist Party as big of an issue as people think it is? So first, let's talk about how Tencent started to take over the world. Let's just say in 1998, a small group of friends decided to copy then popular messaging app called ICQ. They exploited the marketing for ICQ by naming their version OpenICQ or OICQ. Eventually, they were legally forced to change it, which resulted in the name QQ. Things at this stage weren't going all too great because monetizing social media apps is hard. Just ask Reddit, Twitter, or Facebook. The only things of value they have are advertising space and data on their users to sell. Luckily, they eventually received some much needed investment from the least likely of places, South Africa, and a company called Naspers. After that, they go public and money issues are a thing of the past. Now, it's time to move on and crush the opposition. So what do you do when you're a massive corporation with an app that almost all Chinese people use, but you also have other products you want to release and competitors are already occupying that space? Well, if you're Tencent, you simply disable the social media app that everybody uses if your other apps aren't the only ones being used, just like they did with their QQ Doctor antivirus software. Essentially, Tencent used their audience as a hammer of billions of people. Either uninstall our competitors' software or don't use the app anymore, and obviously everyone did exactly what Tencent wanted. It wasn't really a choice at all. Any company that tried to enter the Chinese market was in for similar underhanded tactics. It didn't matter how big they were. Even Microsoft failed to make headway in the market with their MSN Messenger. Tencent just copied all their features and waited for the inevitable victory when Microsoft pulled out, killing support for their failed adventure to this market. Copying, of course, is something that is not so frowned upon pretty much anywhere, but especially not in this region, which is how Tencent got their start in the gaming industry. If a Western game was popular and could easily be copied, looking worse, playing worse, and having worse monetization, well, it probably was being built so, and Tencent was sometimes the architect. This strategy worked out even better since the Great Firewall of China made outside media harder to access for most of the population, resulting in a perfect way to grow domestic market share for Tencent. Now, not everything was being ripped off though, because all those big game companies we mentioned at the start of this video, well, those and many more needed Tencent in order to tap into the Chinese market, which of course is incredibly lucrative. Companies are required to work through a Chinese business in order to do business in the country, such as distributing video games. That means other companies had a pretty clear choice in front of them: either wait for Tencent to release a similar version of their game, likely killing the chances of their game ever releasing there anyway, which would of course reduce profitability to zero in that region, or make a deal with Tencent to publish on their behalf, paying them handsomely to do so. Most big companies obviously chose the latter, as some money is better than no money, and realistically, when you see how big the Chinese numbers are for the bottom line, who can really blame them? Now, if you know a single Chinese person, whether they're from the country, have ever visited, or are just ethnically so, you probably heard them mention the word WeChat. Everyone has it, everyone uses it on an almost daily basis. Shit, I think if you even have a Chinese friend, chances are you even have WeChat. In January of 2011, the first version of WeChat, which was originally called WeChat, was released. It was called a super app, and if you ever used it or looked into what it does, there's absolutely nothing like it in the West. It does literally everything you could ever need to do on your phone, basically. And that's why it has over 1.67 billion active monthly users. Yes, almost a quarter of the planet's population uses this app, and you might not have even heard of it. This gave Tencent an essential monopolization on a large number of industries domestically, and the ability to grow that monopoly whenever they wish to add new features to the app that everyone already used. After all, why would you have an Uber app when you can just have WeChat installed? Why have alternative methods to pay for things when you have WeChat installed? Sometimes Tencent gave companies a choice of partnership with the app, if partner or choice are even the right words for this. Basically the same choices they gave foreign video game developers. Either work with us to reduce our workload and pay us money for facilitating your business, or eventually we'll just do it ourselves and you'll be forced out of the market, because no one in their right mind is going to stop using WeChat at this stage. This obviously makes the Chinese government all very happy, since essentially this centralizes the country's data, as well as that of overseas citizens with a singular app, an app that they had access to, of course. Data is knowledge, and knowledge is power, as they say. There are of course many examples of people being unable to send messages or make posts using the app if it contains words critical of the government or a current happening that they don't want discussed. Even warnings being issued to people over their negative sentiment. There's of course a deeper rabbit hole to go down here, with documented cases of incredible levels of spying, control and intimidation, but that would be an entire video in and of itself. Suffice to say, China, like all other governments, are very interested in what their citizens are doing, and Tencent provided them with a one-stop shop for exactly this. So why do I even bring this up when talking about Tencent and their growing tendrils into the rest of the world? Well, some experts, and of course Western media outlets, say for this specific reason, the China 2049 Global Initiative. In the Communist Party's words, they want to, quote, lead the world in terms of composite national strength and international influence, which many in the West translate into, we want to be the big dog. And one of the ways they could begin to do that is, of course, leveraging corporate interests across the globe, and Tencent has been doing just that. Since around 2010, they've been buying up indie game studios and shares in the biggest companies on the market, with almost no one really batting an eye. Riot Games, they own it. Epic Games, the company that is pushing a game engine that thousands of games are built on per year with growing market share each year, well, they own 40% of that, for now, who knows in the future. They also wholly own Funcom, Leyou and Sumo Group. They own majority stakes in some of the largest indie publishers and developers in the West, such as Grinding Gear Games, and worryingly, tens of billions of dollars split across much of the industry, such as Activision Blizzard, Paradox Interactive, Frontier Developments, Krafton, Kakao, From Software, Netmarble, and of course Ubisoft. There's of course a lot of companies I'm not listing here, and if you basically just Google the word Tencent and acquisition, you'll basically see at least one article every month or so of a studio you know about with a popular game or franchise where Tencent have just bought them, or at least a massive share. Basically, if you own a successful game studio, chances are Tencent has either bought you, offered to buy you, or will do in the next few years if this pattern of behaviour continues. Not only that, they've also put tens of billions of dollars into apps you likely use on a day-to-day basis. Discord, Spotify, Reddit, Snapchat, and of course more. They own a part or majority of 600 different companies at this stage, and they don't appear to be slowing down in this regard. They are an incredibly fast-growing company and a major player in the global economy, specifically now in Western tech. Now this all sounds pretty normal, right? Big company buying shares in other companies and making money. But many people question Tencent's motives, some even going so far as to question whether the CCP has put them up to this task specifically. After all, let's examine a few key points here that might slip the radar for many people. If you were to go on any social media app right now and discuss a Chinese created or owned app, chances are you're going to be told it's spyware. Of course you are. If you go to the Western page for downloading things that you know are owned by a Chinese company, it might even have low review scores based exactly on this sentiment. Not saying I agree, I'm just telling you how people see this. But Tencent owns all of these companies and participates in many more, and yet nobody treats these companies or products at all in the same way. Do you see people leaving one-star reviews on Riot Games' massively growing platform and games due to this ownership and potential risk of, this big spying? No, of course you don't. People just play those games. And there's one reason why. Because you never see the logo or the name Tencent on any of these products. Because they've grown their share of the industry in complete silence. And to what end? Well, I can't give you the end goal, obviously. But what I can give you are clear as day examples of the censorship that envelops China spreading to the West right in front of our eyes. You might remember the infamous Activision Blizzard Hearthstone incident involving Blitzchung, a player who during a winner's interview showed support for Hong Kong during the riots, stating specifically to liberate Hong Kong. For this, Activision Blizzard banned him, fined him his winnings, fired the two casters for being present during the interview, and this of course led to a massive backlash for which Blizzard apologised on multiple occasions. As if we're not used to seeing that already. This is one small example by a company that is only 5% owned by Tencent, but of course do lots of business in the region and don't want to upset people there. So much so that it looks like, at least from an optics standpoint, that they cared more about that than their Western reputation. Now, if that's what 5% and some business in the region does to you, then obviously the more ownership, the more of a problem this is going to be. And there is a wiki link that details many such other examples of Western censorship due to financial ties in China. And I think this is going to illustrate the point that I'm making about the issue with where the industry is headed right now. Now, I do also want to say a few important things, because this video exists to inform you about something you may not be aware of, not to witch hunt people or paint this as anything other than what it is. The core issue here is not Tencent operating as many megacorporations do. Tencent are a company that is doing business how almost everyone else does business too. The issue is, has, and always will be, with their master, the CCP. During the 2020 China tech lockdown, they punished companies like Tencent, wiping billions of dollars off their short-term valuation and trillions of dollars off the market. A reminder that despite being compliant, it might not be enough. This happened for a multitude of reasons, mostly due to Chinese companies' treatment of domestic customers and their data, funnily enough due to the risk of Chinese data falling into foreign hands. And while this video obviously focuses on Tencent due to not many people knowing just how big they are becoming in the industry, that doesn't mean we don't have many of these same issues at home. Meta has been found guilty of data privacy concerns, Google, Microsoft, Apple, they are all essentially spying on you too, and many of these companies collaborated with the NSA to tap into your data for mass surveillance. Not just that, but your private data is sold off to private entities on a regular basis. Does this mean that you should stop participating in all media, whether foreign or domestic? No, clearly not. That's not a viable solution. But what it does mean is you should be informed on what's going on, especially when there is nothing visible on the products. If you're using something, you should probably know who owns it and also then be able to make an informed decision. It should also be noted that according to Tencent and popular consensus, they do try to remain hands-off when they own the majority or entirety of foreign business. But I will also say that isn't always going to be the case, and they probably are only doing so while you're doing what they want and making as much money as they expect you to. So in the end, we are of course in a hyper-capitalistic society where individuals and companies act in their best interest to maximize their financial gains. This is not really any different than what we're used to. They just serve a different master than the companies we already routinely use on a day-to-day basis without blinking an eye. Today it's Tencent in China, tomorrow it's somewhere else. It never really ends. There may not be ethical consumption under capitalism, but awareness in the tech world is free. The agency to decide what we use should fall on an informed user. If this was any other company, from any other region, from any other country, we'd still be having this discussion. But when it's one that we know has, of course, ties to the CCP, and of course the censorship that comes with that, obviously this is something people should know about. So is Tencent an evil megacorporation that's coming for you? Probably not, but their growing control in the industry is one that you should definitely keep an eye on.